got a one piece in it. That's good.
All right, you guys, we're gonna roll. I wanna lead in before I get to the slides really quickly with this. This is like, you know, it's all about economics. Dave's not in the room, right? Anybody from Kavita, Steve, Dave, or Kavita? This is going to be all about operational economics and how we use like energy tools to drive conversation that I think need to be happening very early in the design process, and not at the tail end when the architects and engineers have already designed the building and they show up and they ask for compliance Title 24. But a lot of these conversations are driven by, and what you'll see today with Luke and I, is this heavy emphasis on renewable energy. And what Mark Jacobson was talking about at the keynote yesterday about like this moment in time that we're living in, of the affordability of renewable energy for all of us is just phenomenal. It's like, you know, I have some slides at the very end of my presentation that demonstrate that when we get these systems up and running and we get these buildings online, it is remarkable and it is jaw-dropping. But it doesn't work if the utilities slow walk us to getting our systems turned on, getting permission to operate PTO. In the projects that we build, affordable housing, I'm making the sales pitch constantly of got to go big with solar, got to get as much on. How do we get this project to zero net energy? That's the conversation I have with our design teams very early on. And then, you know, I work for a developer and builder, owner and operator. We never let go. So the conversation starts for us at conceptual design and entitlements, and then continues on into operations. And then people are now asking me, you know, prove it. Show us that what you've been pushing for the last 8 or 10 years is actually working, and we are actually seeing it. But if the utility companies don't turn the systems on and the projects can't generate the revenue that we need, we have 1 year from the time the construction completes to stabilize our costs and to close our permanent funding for the project. So our underwriters, the big banks, are looking at it and saying, you said it was going to be $5,000 to operate your building, the common areas per year, and your bills say $60,000. So we're not going to underwrite your permanent loan based on $50,000 a year in savings, and in some cases it's costing us millions of dollars. So it's really, really dire. So that Cal Matters piece is real. I've been complaining about this, and we're complaining in very formal ways with the CUC ongoing because it's really, really painful. Really quick introductions. I'm Tim Kohut. I'm Director of Sustainability for National Community Renaissance. We got Luke Morton in the presentation with me, and Luke and I have kind of teamed up to standardize, which for me is sort of high volume. We're very, very busy in trying to institutionalize and systematize our approach to energy analysis. So we're going to share with you guys our process of how this works. We'll do a little bit of hands-on at the very end. But before that, I want to do a little bit of context, lay out a little bit of context for us. And before I do this, just you know, a little survey of the room. Everybody who's an energy analyst in the room? Anybody who's an architect or a designer? Regulators? City officials? Developers? Other? Okay. Well, you know, as we go through this, we'll try to leave some time at the very end, and we'll be very loose at the very end so we can answer questions for you guys. But I mean, the goal is really to walk through as quickly as possible what we're doing, what we're trying to achieve, and then at the very end, what I'll do with my piece is identify what I think are our goals for where we are in this moment in time to leverage this great economic moment that we're living through. And I'm looking for, as a representative for the developer builder, I'm looking for energy freedom. I'm looking for liberation. I want our costs to be as low for us as possible, because these are affordable housing projects that we'll own for forever. And our residents, the deeper we get with renewable energy, the more affordable their housing becomes permanently, because the sun, when it comes up tomorrow morning after the rain that we'll get this afternoon is gonna charge us the same amount of money for the energy that it's putting on the solar panels as it did yesterday, the same amount it will cost for 10 years from now. So the more you can get your residents tied to that renewable energy, the better it's gonna be for them. We're all over sustainability. We've power builder, we're deep into zero net energy buildings. We've been doing all electric for about 8 or 9 years now. This is a little bit of Mark Jacobson, like stealing some information from him, talking about where we are and why this is so important. And this, to me, is not fiction, because I work for a builder, and I work on the construction team, and the most skeptical people that I deal with are my construction team and the estimators, who do not want to make decisions for emotional reasons. They make it for economic reasons purely. But now we're also thinking about the long-term operating impacts of this, and we've watched the costs come down, and it will flatten. We're dealing with tariffs and things like that. Labor is going to continue to rise, but the cost of solar will continue to come down, and we're looking forward to the cost of batteries coming down. Has anybody read McKibben's new book, Bill McKibben's new book? I mean, it's astonishing. I've been reading Bill McKibben ever since I was in college. He came out with The End of Nature, I think, in 1987 or 88 or something like that. And he is my North Star when I want to figure out where we are with the climate crisis and what's happening. And his writing sometimes is very, very dark, but his new book, Here Comes the Sun, is the most positive reflection of where we are with the climate crisis that I've read in 30 years. And I'd say every third page he's quoting Mark Jacobson as his source for data. So kudos to CABEC for getting Mark Jacobson here. It's really, really great. But it is here. It's here now. And there's dark moments in the book that I could talk about if we have time, or if you catch me tonight, I could talk to you about some of the dark things that he says in that book that really keep me up at night. But everything else is, the opportunity is here, and it's happening now. We're already doing it in California. We're hearing this over and over again here. We're going carbon neutral by 2045. We'll beat the electrification date for the grid before that. I think Mark Jacobson is saying 2035 to 2037, we will electrify the grid. We still got a lot of work to do on other things like transportation and industry and things like that, but we're certainly gonna get there. And I was flashing my iPad this morning at the new graphs, because the graph that I had was 2023, but now Commissioner Hochschild showed the new ones, where we are in California, and it's happening all around us, whether you believe it or not. It's here. It's just a matter of how much we want to look at this and how much we want to just recognize that there's opportunity for all of us. So once a year I go to UCLA, and they have this housing symposium for affordable housing developers, and I went there in September of 2024, and this was my Cal ISO graph from 2024, and it shows the big spike in the afternoon when the sun goes down. Here comes the natural gas. And then I did it this year, about the time I was reading Bill McKibben's book, and suddenly you see this, and you hit this moment in the book where McKibben says that in 40 years of writing about the climate crisis, he's never had a more positive piece of data than what he read from Mark Jacobson in January of this year, where in 1 year, between 2023 and 2024, the gas utilization on the grid dropped by 30% in a single year, and then it dropped another 10% between January and April. And for somebody like McKibben, who sees the dark side of climate change, when he says that's the most positive thing he's ever seen in the climate crisis, it shows you what's happening. And what's happening here is, if you go back a slide, here it is in 1 year. It's like essentially the same climate throughout California. It didn't get that much hotter, but we're seeing this great moment with battery storage. And then I sort of cast through this, and it seems trivial now after we've all heard from Mark Jacobson, seeing stuff like this. But to see how we're progressing in the state of California, and see what's happening with the growth of rooftop solar and the diminishing of natural gas is astonishing for all of us. I mean, despite the fact that we're now falling behind globally, as a country in California, hey, we're still the 4th largest economy in the world, and we are really kicking in. So, what does this mean for affordable housing? I mean, it is all about economics. You don't develop affordable housing with an abundance of capital. You just don't. Like the funding is so slim, and the developers have to get so wily and creative in stacking together their financing. There's never surplus money. So to be able to do this, get to zero in affordable housing is a really challenging obstacle for all of us. But we've got to keep our eye on the cost to operate the housing, because you don't just build it, you've got to operate it. And if you do this correctly, if we're all aware of this, that your lenders who are underwriting your permanent financing are all looking at your operational economics. And they are very slow to get on board with this, but now they've seen enough of this where they're starting to believe, with the exception that the utility companies take too long to turn on their systems. So Luke and I are going to get into this process here of how this works for us, and here's some examples of projects that we've built in the last, I'd say 7 to up to about 7 years ago. This is Via Serena, 88 units in San Marcos. There's my my Title 24 required rooftop solar. And the rooftop solar component here is got to get to zero net energy for a 3-story building, and then anything beyond that for hot water heating you exclude. So they didn't want to penalize natural gas in the previous code, so they just took it out of the equation. That does not get us to zero net energy, doesn't help me with the economics. So that's what we need to get to zero net energy. And playing the economic game with the development team and the construction team, we were able to demonstrate that we can generate enough money out of this using the utility allowance and the QAP to generate enough revenue to service the additional debt that they need to build the carports and add another 70 kW or so on top of that. So who works in affordable housing? Okay, so the rule is, for affordable housing, your residents cannot pay more than 30% of their income for rent plus utilities. Okay, and your utility allowances are generally established by a published utility allowance. So you decide where you are in this jurisdiction. I can't remember, this is County of San Diego. 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, and you decide what your energy uses are, and you add those up, and you come up with a number. And you use that, you've got to discount what you want to charge in rent by the amount of money that the residents can anticipate paying in their utilities. Okay, so I think I got a number here. Yeah, there it is. $121 for a 1 bedroom, $169 for a 2 bedroom, and $224 for a 3 bedroom using the published utility allowance. Right, so that's a lot of money. Whereas if we decided we were going to go with a utility allowance calculation here, California utility allowance calculation, and value in the solar to the residents. If I buy that solar as part of the new construction project, compare that to what the utility allowances are, and then do the simple math on this, I'm generating about $130,000 of additional cash flow for the property. So the 70 kW, maybe that cost me $200,000, and the carport probably cost me another $50,000. So $260,000 that I can probably pay off in 2 to 3 years, and then I'm making money, right? But this is the conversation. It is, don't stop at Title 24, and don't think that Title 24 zero net energy is your endpoint. Our endpoints collectively are total energy, zero net energy, zero carbon, in my opinion. This is Via Serena now operating. Funny story, it took them about 2 or 3 weeks to get us to PTO, permission to operate the PV system. Had a magician of a construction manager who's always able to work out the relationship between the solar installer and the utility. SDG&E turned on the PV system very quickly, and there was a problem with 1 meter. Somewhere in the VNEM allocation, virtual net energy metering, take all of the credit from the solar, distribute it behind the curtain to all of the residential units based on calculations that we come up with. And there was a problem with 1 meter, and it took them 18 months to figure out that there was a problem. So they didn't credit us a dime for the energy that we were producing for 18 months, and our annual cost went up to about $80,000 a year for the common areas. And our residents, who were supposed to be paying $30 a month for their electricity, were paying probably $200 a month. Right? And it took us 18 months, and a formal complaint had to be filed to the PUC. And when I called the SDG&E and got their helpline, there's nobody at the VNet desk. You have to call the customer service and complain to them, and you finally get to a manager. When I talked to the manager, they said, yeah, this is a problem. You should file a formal complaint. Like, we should not be doing this. But when now the operational side, what's happening is common area electricity, we were paying $80,000, is now $11,000 in fixed, right? And that is not going to escalate a whole lot. There's below your energy use charges, those fixed charges that we all pay that are going to be there. It's never going to be $0. But this is certainly much, much better than what we see before. What you see here is like the 3 bars on the left that finally go down. If you point at the small, there you go. That's when the solar finally came on, right? And if the very bottom here, you can see what happens to our costs: 53,000, 34,000, and then now it's down it gets to $11,000 for the year. This is the money shot for us. When I'm going back to our team, our development team, and they hear me talking about all electric, zero net energy for years, and they're like, prove that it's actually working. I've got a slide at the very end which will show what I showed them, that it is working. It really does matter. And for all of us, this is what's been happening like in the last 10 years in the state of California. And it's gonna get worse. Like Edison passed, I heard, a rate change approved, 10%, right? It's going to get worse, and as we get more and more of those fixed charges there, they're gonna go up. What's the liberating opportunity for us here? More PV. Got to get these projects to zero net energy. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act, we're part of a larger national affiliate network of affordable housing developers. And the administrators and the analysts at this organization, SAFE, Stewards of Affordable Housing in the Future, studied the impact nationally of what rescinding OBA, or rescinding the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, was going to do to utility rates across the country. And they said 11% increase across the country just because we're disincentivizing renewable energy. Throw on top of that everything we're doing in California, and this is what we've got to combat. So operational economics, is anybody working with permanently supportive housing? Anybody got housing for the formerly homeless? Like great projects. Like, and they're for us, we pay for all electricity when we do a PSH project, permanently supportive housing. So the residents come in, they have an on-site social worker, they're transitioning from life on the streets to life in a supported environment, but they're also not paying their electricity bills. So it's baked in. So these are really, really challenging. And some of the things that we learned here is like, here's my analysis for Nestor Senior, one of these, I think this is 80 units in San Diego. This was my analysis for the whole project, $1.5 million worth of savings for solar, investing in solar over the 15-year life of the tax credits. Really, really great. And then suddenly the data starts coming in, $102,000 of savings, $102,000 worth of electricity savings. But suddenly, like I'm looking at the energy platform, the energy scorecard benchmarking platform that we use is on that side. And I'm going through and I can now monitor the electricity bills at unit level. Like in common areas, like zero. It's like, wow, really did a good job estimating how much PV to allocate to the common areas. Now, how about everybody else? And some of these guys, Israel builders, like $800 a year, $885. And this is before the PV came on, but then there's these guys who are like $2,500. They're like 4 times the amount of the utility allowance. And so I'm sitting here trying to figure out what is going on in these units. And I'm speculating. We have these verdant thermostats. We've learned over time that you can't, in PSH projects, you can't put a thermostat on the wall that allows a resident to just open their window with their air conditioning blasting on a 100-degree day. So we now have window sensors that turn off the verdant thermostats. It doesn't allow them to go below 66 degrees when it's hot or 83 when it's cold. But what I see here is in a couple of these units is, including that one that was really, really expensive, they're turning off their thermostat. And then we also have sensors outside that say, hey, it's getting really, really cold outside. They turned off the thermostat, but the temperature in the unit is going up. So, and when you see that, like, we're all creative, like, if the temperature outside is going down, And the inside temperature is going up, not slowly like time lag, a couple degrees, going up significantly, 80 degrees, 84 degrees, 85 degrees. What do you assume might be happening inside the unit? What is the resident doing?
Growing marijuana.
Possibly.
And electric resistance heating.
Electric resistance heating. Are they plugging in the wall, or what else do they got in their unit that might be heating their unit?
Stove or an oven.
Their stove or their oven. So here's my email to the property manager. Hey, Eric, what's going on? We got this one unit. Well, it's not what's going on. It's like, Eric, we got this one unit. It's driving me crazy. And I think there might be 3 things that are going on here. Can you go into the unit and try to figure what's going on? And sure enough, I do this, and he says, yeah, went into the unit, and after walking into the unit, we found the resident was using his stove as a heater. Right? So, part of this is economics and opportunity renewable energy, but the next step for us is we're going to start dropping in energy monitors into the panels in all of the units, and we're going to start getting alerts on energy use. So, and then we're hiring somebody in National Core who's going to be my resident energy education coordinator, who's going to be working with on-site staff and residents so that they don't do unsafe things, right? But this is, we all have to be mindful of this. In family projects and senior projects, you're not going to have this problem because they pay their own electricity bills. In PSH projects, housing for the formerly homeless, anything can happen. And then when you do the model, people come to me like, how close is your modeling to actual results? And I'm like, I'm pretty damn good until they start doing this, right? So I mean, it is a real big challenge. But I do want to talk about other things that we were doing. Because like the conversation, Raul had a really good presentation about microgrids. I'll get to our microgrid in a little while. But designing for resilience in these properties is really important, not only for the social well-being of your community, but also for economic reasons. So one of the things that we do here and in our exchange of our workflow with Luke and I is I'm modeling an IESVE, doing laying out the building, making design decisions, trying to tell the architects what they need to do in terms of giving me more space for solar. But I'll also look at how much energy is going into the community room, how much energy is going into the offices, because those are the safe spaces. If there is a power outage at some point, those are the spaces that we want to be secure with energy and electricity and air conditioning if there's a heat wave during an earthquake or something like that. So this couple shots here about how do we identify, what can we do to work with our design teams to provide a little bit more information. It doesn't need to be in IESVE, we can do this in CABEC. Just all we're doing here is isolating the loads. And what I do inside of IESVE, I can keep it all in one model. I identify everything that I call a critical load. I create these sub-meters. I want to know what the residential loads are. I want to know what the common area loads are. I want to know what's going for hot water heating. I want to know how much is going for HVAC, so I can isolate those and do more in-depth analysis. So for our resiliency, we want the community room HVAC, we want the community room lighting. Those are in critical plug loads. Charge your phone, refrigerator's got to be on for medicine and things like that. And then what we do is find the hottest day. I want to design for the hottest day because all we're doing here is identifying how many kilowatt hours I'm going to need on that worst day and what my peak load is going to be. So this is my energy curve for that particular use. And then it's just going to be a little bit of analysis using a good tool or doing some really good math of what does the battery configuration look like. So this is an ISV, they have a decent plug-in. And I was running an energy simulation file for only the community room and only the offices. That's all I wanted to see. And I ended up with 44 kilowatt hours of PV. Got to have the PV plugged into this model. And then I'm going in here and I'm messing around with the battery sizes. 30 kilowatt battery, 60 kilowatt hours. You can operate for 2 hours if they are pulling full 30 kW from it, right? And then it's just a matter of going back to that hottest day. Here's the building energy demand. Here's what I'm depositing into the battery when the sun is out. Here's the PV that's generated. And then the total building energy, if you look at the discharge from the battery, is it sustaining? Can I get to probably 10 o'clock at night? Because 10 o'clock at night, everybody turn off the air conditioner, everybody go back to your units, open the windows, come back tomorrow, we'll start the process, and when the sun is shining, we've got all the energy that we need on the most critical day. And then the next thing to do is to back check it against the darkest day of the year. Here's the energy demand. This is your Excel spreadsheet if you want it. Here's the building energy demand. Here's the PV that I'm generating in electricity. It's going negative during the day. If it's going negative, it's going into the battery. Here's my grid impact. It's got to be 0 or positive. If this is going to work for me, I want to be giving energy back to the grid. And then energy deposited or withdrawn. If I got a little bit of negative number at the end of the day, that's great. If it's 0, I probably want to upsize slightly, right? Then I'm going to go back to the shortest day of the year. If there's an earthquake or something like that in January, the sun's not going to be out as long. My loads are going to be a little bit less. But it's the same analysis here. There's the energy profile. Not worried about the air conditioner coming on to try to keep people cool in January. But can I make it through the shortest day of the year with that analysis? And it's the same sort of math here. Building energy demand. There's my PV generated. There's my grid import. Got to be 0 or positive. And then there's what I'm depositing or withdrawing. And that's all we're doing. How much energy do I need? How many kilowatt hours do I need on that for those critical moments? Like, don't be freaked out about this if you're doing it for a house. It's just how much do you want to keep on and connected to that? Or if you have a house with a power wall, just do the analysis. If you want to figure this out and you're doing a house, talk to Robert and plug in your car and figure out how much. It's so small what you actually need for typical uses, for critical loads in a community room or something like that or in your house. There's so many great ways to do this, and the pricing of batteries is now starting to drop, and the technology is changing dramatically. This is the analysis, like my team said, prove to us that what you've been doing the last 10 years is actually working. And so what you've got here is a couple of this is all of our properties in National Core that have been built since 2014 or so, when we really started caring about this. Some of these are mixed fuel buildings. They still have gas boilers. And then the red line here is the cost per property. Red line is our spend in 1 year. Well, this is now the drop in the last couple of years that we're seeing. So what we want to see slowly over time is that we're pulling this further and further down. Another way to look at it, projects built in the last 10 years, right? There's another. This is another one to do. Another way to look at it. So this is energy use intensity. The zero net energy building is going to be zero net energy, 0 kBTUs per square foot, and this is the annual spend by the owner. So really, really intuitively, it's like some of these projects here, like SDG&E has the highest utility rates in the continent of the United States. The last time I checked, PG&E, they're kind of going neck and neck, I think. But what we see here is I've highlighted what's in SDG&E territory. So when our team is looking at it saying, well, why is the zero net energy project in San Diego more expensive than it is in SD territory? Well, their utility rates are higher, they've got more fixed charges and things like that. But more than anything, what we want to see is, what we're starting to show is that there's more of these projects that are getting pulled back here as they get closer and closer to zero for common area utility costs. They're getting more and more affordable to operate. And that's what we wanted to demonstrate, because I'm going back to them, to the developers, and to our lenders in trying to say, lend us more money, because our utility costs are going to be lower. And when you compare me to the older projects, like not great energy use intensity, really expensive to operate. Arrowhead Grove, big long story, right? These projects out here, $125,000 a year, $200,000 a year, even 184 units, more than $1,000 per year per unit for common area energy. Just crazy. So everything what we're doing is got to drive it further down. Got to get it to 0 kBTUs per square foot as close as possible. Got to get the cost as close to 0 to operate as possible. Yeah, SDG&E. Okay, so really quickly before I cue into like a little bit of our process, this is where we're going now. This is Rose Creek Village under construction currently in San Diego. I think this one is 59 units of housing for the formerly homeless, 5 stories, and parking underneath the podium. So this is the game for me, and there's nobody here from SDG&E, right? Okay, sorry. Okay, we love you guys. We'll get to the Edison properties in just a second here, so we'll be equally discriminating. Because the costs are so high, I want more solar. Okay, so I'm going to the architects and I'm saying, rooftop solar not enough anymore. Okay, the cost of solar is dropping so dramatically here that we've got to change the way that we look at buildings. Okay, so we're on this quest now. We've got, I'll show you the other two with the right architect. We're just doing solar facades. We're figuring it out. And right now, this is complicated. Studio E is the architect on Rose Creek Village. We've come up with a system. We still stucco our buildings. We're building a metal frame in front of, a steel frame in front of the stucco to carry it across so we don't screw around with our weatherproofing of the building envelope. And I like it, the project has enough budget to carry it, but it's adding $150,000 worth of steel. And I want to get that down to zero as much as possible. This is what Rose Creek Village looks like, the energy profile. We're paying for all the energy, $127,000 when I was running the numbers a couple years ago for operating costs for the whole building, right? And then I turn on the PV and we are NEM 2, deed restricted affordable housing. We fought long and hard for the exemption that we are not tethered to NEM 3. We still get NEM 2 rates for our projects. When we turn on the PV here, $123,000 worth of operational savings. And over the 15-year life of the tax credit, it's about $2 million worth of savings. That's a big deal for affordable housing projects. So this one is Valley Creek. This is in Escondido. I think this one's 80-ish units, Studio E again. And again, the strategy here is make it architectural. Give me solar. This is the current thinking. This one has budget problems, so I may be rethinking how we approach this. But the architect has just risen to the challenge. Let's make these large gestures in a way that really transforms our thinking. This is our Epic project. This is Palm Avenue here in San Diego. This is 79 units of family right on a trolley line. And so we've got an Epic grant that has challenged our team to, it's got to be a zero net energy building. It has a microgrid that's going to carry the entire building every single day between 4 o'clock and 9 o'clock. And then when the grid goes down, what's going to happen is this building will carry half the loads for 48 hours and 10% of the loads, critical stuff, for perpetuity. You know, as long as the grid is down, right? So this is with the right architect and the right developer and the right energy analyst pushing this. It's like, this is what we want. Like I show up to teams now that aren't National Core and I talk to them, I'm like, here's what we're doing. Solar walls, here's the economics, they give it to the developers and they've got to convince their design teams to do this. The architects just don't know what to do with it. So it's like, it's up to us as an industry, I think, to get in the face of these people, because if we do this, the long-term cost to own and operate this building are going to be near zero, and we're going to be able to do so much more for the residents and lock in their long-term affordability. So this is all the stuff that we've got going on as part of the EPIC grant. You know, some interesting things that are going to be built in: phase change, materials, heat pump dryers. Here's the microgrid. Funny that the neighborhood may grow now and we may be building more than one building. We may go after ASIC funding, affordable housing sustainable communities, which would grow the project, which would require us to actually increase the size of the microgrid for this. But then we want to potentially master plan for the rest of the neighborhood. There's 4 more buildings, I think 400 units that we're going to be building on this one rail line. And like here's like when we did this, the Title 24 standard is on the furthest. In the middle is what National Core does today. Like this Arup is our technical consultant on this. So we were already 20% better with our approach to all electric buildings, and electric hot water heating, big solar. So this last piece is we got it down another 6% by these other little gestures that we're putting into this. And then more than anything, it's like, how do you curb peak demand? That's the big thing with the microgrid. How can you curb the peak demand, and how can you shift those hours out of the peak period? And that's what has to happen every single day. Is anybody working with a microgrid? Trying to do a microgrid? It's super challenging because there are so few vendors and designers out there working in this space. So I think everybody who's still working on an EPIC grant project right now is struggling to find the EPIC grant provider. And this is, we've landed on a provider now who we are working with, and the project, Palm Avenue will start construction in 2026, some point in 2026. We've been staring at it for a long time. And then Luke and I have been kicking this around and trying to make the economic case, so I throw this out to Luke from IEDS into CABEC, and Luke helps with the compliance energy model, and then we're running the QEC. And the goal with the QEC is, forget about the microgrid, just the facade solar, the zero net energy solar. The QEC, unfortunately, right now, you can't model the benefits of battery storage. But we don't care because we have NEM3 or NEM2. But these are the fixed costs, and those may escalate slightly, 50 cents, $1 a year, something like that. But when they're as close to zero as possible, these are not going to go up forever. So this is, for us, this great opportunity where this is not just about environmental justice, this is about economic justice, especially when we're dealing in this region of increasingly high utility rates and more escalation. Like this is, for me, is like screaming at it. I need more solar wall. Common area electricity bills go, we save $115,000 a year on it. So my transition over, let me show this real quick. So Luke and I now want to talk about process, like what this looks like for us, the way that we collaborate. So I'll do a 5-minute journey through the way that we model, and then hand it over to Luke, and then we can talk about this. We want to share with everybody here, this is what we're doing to influence design decision making. It's not just, here's my model, please smog check me Title 24 and tell me what I need to do for my sins and transgressions. It is drive the conversation as early as possible. So this is the Iris and San Isidro project that we're working on right now. Luke just finished the QEC on it. And ISB, does anybody use ISB? Yeah, so ISB is, hey, we can 3-dimensionally model the building. So I'm always starting with a 3-dimensional model of the building. It does not need to be exact. I just got to make sure that my envelope and my window sizes are correct and my orientation is correct. My assemblies are correct. My construction assemblies are defined correctly so that I can run a quicker analysis. And then what I do inside of ISV is I'm going in and always defining my meters. Because when I run IES, just like CABEC is going to run a complete analysis of the building every 10 or 15 minutes for every single day, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. But we don't want one lump sum necessarily, because my first goal as an energy analyst for National Core is I got to get the common area to zero net energy. I am selfish. Okay? I'm lowering the cost for National Core first, so it's affordable to operate the project as possible, and then anything else that's surplus, I give over to residents and we go into the QA. Right, so I run the analysis here, and then I get into the analysis file, and the output file just looks like anything you would pull out of CABEC. And but you can organize it very, very nicely inside of ISB, because if I hit this, here are all of my loads. So if I wanted to do just common area loads, for example, critical loads, elevator, exterior lighting, laundry, water use, right? I could just identify those, isolate those, and here are my loads for the entire year. So this is a really important piece of information, but I want the annual file, so I just come in here and I just say analysis table, and now I get 8,760 hours. And so I'm going to copy this file, and the next step for me is I'm going to go over to Energy Toolbase. Has anybody used Energy Toolbase besides Luke? Pricey, right? Use it when you need it. Use it when you can build it into your budget here. But here's the Iris at San Isidro, and what I can do with this now is I can create my unique energy file here. Here's my profile. I can upload my interval data. So I just want common area loads. I need to know how much PV I need for common areas. So I'm just going to upload that interval file for common areas only and run that. And then what Energy Toolbase will do for you instantaneously, which is the beautiful thing, is it's going to grab all of the utility rates from around the country. You can grab, make sure that you're using the current rate, and then it will spit it out into a custom document that I use with our development team, with our investors, right? Because they want to know, how much am I going to spend? Yeah, you got a nice smile, you talk a good, you put up a good story here, but show me the data. And so what Energy Toolbase is going to give me is the data. Here's my operational savings for the common area. I've now zeroed in on how much PV. Energy Toolbase will help me identify how much PV I need only for the common area. So this one I said 104 kilowatt hours of the 192 on the roof go to common area. And then here's what my operational costs are going to be. $64,000 a year without it, which will be what I'll pay SDG&E for a long time until they give us PTO. It's going to be painful until we get there. But after it's done, $3,500 a year. I'll tell the development team to double the number, hold on to $8,000, maybe escalate 3% per year or 4% per year, but that's my number. And then the last thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to go into helioscope. Does anybody use helioscope? So I don't give it to a designer. We're defining the conversations internally. It's not a crazy, complicated tool to use. Get in there and do the analysis yourself, upload the plans, it's so intuitive, and then do the layout yourself. Once you do this layout, what's really nice about Energy Toolbase is you can import the layout that you want into Energy Toolbase, so it will automatically show how much PV, how much your costs are going to go down based on the current design. Iris and San Ysidro drove me crazy because it's going to be zero net energy, 240 kW of PV, and then the installer went in here and started doing things that drive me crazy. They changed the racking system. They're missing all of the roof vents, which drives me crazy. They're missing areas of roof. I could have got another 15 or 20 kW out of this roof. So the last thing I'm doing now is that we're just adjusting our own process so that the designer doesn't get to go beyond a helioscope in design until we've reviewed their design and approved it. Otherwise, they're going to do whatever they want. From here, the challenge is, I've got all of this, I can start the conversation, I can manage the conversation, but I need somebody to help me verify that Title 24, we've got it under control, and we've got a QF, and here comes Luke with the handoff. So I'm sending, the other thing I'm doing in ISV, it has a really nice plugin to export out to CABEC. So I run the analysis in CABEC, create the KGOT file to CABEC from ISVE, and I hand it to Luke. And then where I used to spend hours and hours sorting through messages, error messages in CABEC, and calling Luke on a Saturday night trying to figure out what's going on, now I'm like, Luke, I just need you doing this process.
So I'm going to take it over, and we've got about 15 more minutes, but I do want to make sure we get some good time for questions. So I'm going to be pretty hand-wavy about this part. We can double-click on stuff later, or however you guys like. First, I wanted to mention, we've got this workflow with IES, VE, and I can talk ad nauseum about it, but we do recognize some of these tools are very nice, but not cheap commercial tools. So I always have in mind, like, if I were to add some extra sort of elbow grease in here, some extra coding work, what are some FOSS free and open source or publicly funded tools? If you guys were in my session yesterday, you can imagine using OpenStudio's floorSpace.js to create those simple box models, like Tim's doing in IES. And then, for non-risk, how do you build from the existing CABEC tools, Energy Plus, simulations to get some of those meter exports. If you're doing residential, then you're doing CSE modeling. All that is out there and available for you. It's documented. It might take some learning to do to get to the same results that Tim and I are getting, but it's totally possible. And then another tool that I've been interested in exploring but haven't had a need yet, but is NREL produces System Advisor model, which is SAM, but it has very detailed PV and battery microgrid modeling, as well as it's using, what is it called, the open source energy rates database, I forget what it's called. but it
Open it up.
downloads it. Might take some proofreading. It's in terms of making sure it's got everything dialed in according to the TOUDR1 for SDG&E. But it should be able to kind of simulate the same kind of stuff as Tim and I are doing. Okay, so step one, when Tim sends me the CABEC file, it's kind of a generic, it's got the geometries in there. It's got some default residential, HVAC systems, domestic hot water, and envelope assemblies. So step one, this is where your kind of magic is. If you're in the consulting world, you've got templates. You kind of know, you have a starting point for what that project's going to do. What kind of wall it's going to be? Is it 2x6, R21, synthetic stucco? You do your magic on this. And so I have my template file, and I'm literally splicing in all that library I have and into that file that Tim is sending me. And then there's still some legwork in terms of replugging in. Okay, I've got to assign all the assemblies, the envelope elements to that project. If you were in my class yesterday, you probably saw my model grid. There's a bunch of different tools I can get into. The simple XML editor is amazing for this. I'm using notepads, whatever. And I'm starting to build my own Python scripts. Then I'm debugging. So I'm pressing play. I'm like, okay, there's always some random stuff. So it tends to be, as in for instance, IES for some reason likes to embed interior doors into walls that are too small for them. And it only shows up if you're in Marina's class tomorrow, it'll be this error in this random folder over here, and all the energy CABEC says is like, it didn't run, CSE wasn't happy in the PD simulation. You're like, no, there's nothing wrong with the PD. It's like you go and double click on it, it's like, all your surfaces are too small. Okay, fine, so that's my first Python script. Okay, check if the darn surface, the interior wall is too small for the door, and increase the size of that wall. And and you do that like 50 times. And then lastly, okay, jumping to the end point here. Here's my actual model for Iris, and I'm making sure 8 runs for compliance first. That's a good kind of check on and see if the outputs on the compliance run are if it's way out of compliance, there's something weird going on, and it's probably not going to, because QAC doesn't care about compliance. I don't have my numeracy in terms of what's appropriate for the QAC. So I'm using that compliance run to kind of gut check and error check is the domestic hot water system a keystroke error on my heat pump water heater central system. So not enough units in there, and it huge domestic hot water loads, and it's like, oh no, that was wrong. That literally happened on this project. So then I'm running compliance to make sure it can run, even though this particular project is a 2019 code cycle, so we're still using the embedded QAC for 2022 on this. And then, we can do a little sidebar. In this case, I knew it was the rate schedule. You're plugging in all this stuff, VNM2, DR1. So some of these rates embedded in here need some updating. So you read through this list, and you're like, TOUDR1. So sometimes I'm going to the tariff book from SDG&E. I'm like, okay, what's the right rate? Especially if you're doing schematic design, you're making a reasonable guess. You're looking at it. Hey, and you might, if there's a couple of different rates that might be viable. All right, try several of them. And then you have the rest of your assumptions built in here. There's gas, you plug that in, and then you press play. Okay, the other part of the magic I wanted to get to before we get to questions, that in this particular project, Tim told me ahead of time, it's built, he had his total PV, he knows what he needs for his common areas. Take the difference, that's what you assign to each of the dwelling units. And I'm playing around with these numbers, you can't really see them too well, but okay, the input total amount that is available for the dwelling units is up here. And I'm kind of guesstimating, this is a little bit of a heuristic, test and repeat. to get a balance where the one bedroom units, you probably didn't focus on that too much before, the other one, but the one bedroom units have the lowest bill, 2 bedroom, that's slightly higher, 3 bedroom, even slightly higher. So that works with the politics of the project, right? These are just numbers you're kind of massaging and get a result that looks right. And Tim and I, and tells the story that we want to tell for the project for how to get funding for this.
Yeah, the key with it is, this is the place and service at the very end, but we're also doing this, like our workflow with me and Luke is, I'm running a conceptual energy model. As soon as I get the entitlement drawings, we'll run a quick Title 24, and then I'll ask Luke, give me a QAC.
Yeah.
And then I'll run the QAC now and run the facade solar and say, here are your operating costs, zero net energy, here's your QAC with facade solar. And this is where you could get your project economically. Use that to make design decisions and programming decisions for your design team before they go much further. And then I think that's the realm that we need to live in. The QEC is not the end of construction and, hey, how did it go out there? What'd you build? Let me see what the impact of it is. No, it's our ability really to use economics to shape the future of the design of affordable housing at a minimum. And as soon as we do affordable housing, like my line for years has always been, if we can do this in affordable housing, anybody can do this. Any questions? I know we're right at we've got, I guess, 7 minutes.
Yeah, 7 minutes, yeah.
Yeah.
So if I'm following this right, on the economics, this isn't even close, right? Like you're getting probably 3 times as much revenue from doing the solar as you are from doing on the unit, or
Yeah.
costing you a third.
Yeah.
So is the only hang up in the industry that there just aren't enough people that we can help today in the future?
2, there's not enough people like us, and there needs to be more of us doing QAC work. This community needs to get out and communicate the opportunities to the affordable housing developers everywhere. That's the first obstacle. The next obstacle, and I'm dealing with this with third-party developers now who I'm consulting with, who have a design with an architect, they're going through entitlements, and I'm like, hey, how about some facade solar? Here's what I can do to your numbers. And they say, oh, no, we can't drive up the construction costs. And then the first thing I say is, well, I'll increase your revenue so you can service more debt. And they're like, oh, it's gonna make us uncompetitive with the tax credits, right? And then I say, well, how about I bring my own financing to the game? This is where I wanna go, maybe come back next year while I figure this out, because if design teams can't run out of money, then I wanna go out and find the 4% or 5% low interest green funds that will buy the solar and allow us to get into a solar service agreement or a lease and pay them for the electricity. And then the life cycle cost of energy with this, if you divide up over 15 years the amount of kilowatt hours that you're gonna get here at zero net energy and divide it by the cost of the system, even when you're leasing it or doing an SSA, with a little bit of upfront, you might be at 15 cents a kilowatt hour. And that's still a whole lot cheaper than what you're paying in the market. So that's the untapped opportunity here. Like the developers, they just know what to do based on their rule book that they've been using for the last 10 years. And the rule book needs to change, as Mark Jacobson kind of pointed out to us. It's a pivotal moment for us to grasp it. And you either keep the money as revenue to the property, or you surrender to the utility companies. And right now, for the next 4 years or 3.5 years, I'm a libertarian. And I'm a capitalist, right? And then later I'll be back to being an environmentalist. But right now it is, how much money do you want to keep? I want to keep as much money on our properties for us as we can.
So I had a question about the battery sizing that you were doing and the calculations for the critical loads.
Yeah.
Versus what Title 24 requires you to size for just,
Yeah.
the PV power. And are those pretty close, or is it adequate what's in code, or it's helpful to have the analysis, but I'm curious how those.
It's a great question, Dave. So the challenge for us with Luke and I when we're running this is how do I model my building under the 2022 code, what we've been doing, without having any battery storage requirement at all. So we've been able to do it because we beat the minimum amount of solar. So it drives down what we're doing, so we've been able to avoid it altogether. How it's gonna go in the 2025 code, I don't know. But I'm assuming as soon as we do it, we're really good at leveraging other savings, that we're gonna have a very small battery component. The batteries, we've been designing for future battery storage in our projects anyway, so that when the rebates arrive, which they are now, we just plug and play, critical loads panels are already set up by our electrical engineer, it's already being powered by some solar, now it's just kind of wired in. So ask me like next year when I've got some more 2025 builds, but right now we've been able to model around the battery in every single project we've worked on, 4, 5, 6 story buildings. Yes?
Just procedurally, most people are using CABEC or energy code.
Yeah.
Right? So why couldn't we just start with CABEC?
You can?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
And
you
then,
can.
and then go right to QA.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, I mean, just to
I
simplify
use,
things.
the only reason I use IESB because I consider IESB to be a design tool. And so
Right.
I'm shaping the design, I can actually do, like, show what it looks visually, and then the most important thing for me is I can sub-meter. I can add the sub-meters,
So
I wanna
maybe
know,
that
it's
part is not in CABEC?
it's the only way to,
Submeter?
the only way to do
You
it
can
is
do it
that,
CABEC.
Okay.
the only, if you can, before we used to break apart the model.
Yeah.
Residential over here, commercial over here, and then add them up.
But you can do it, but it's really an extra, you're taking the physics model and amending it so you get the right metering. So it takes some programming. I'm gesturing at that.
Keep coming to Luke's classes because the goal is with this, and we may do some brown bags about how to do this. We want everybody doing this, and not
Yeah.
everybody can afford to license ISVE every year.
Yeah, my question actually goes on to that because I do a lot of affordable housing, but they don't always pursue like leads, so I don't have a reason to build an ISV model. I'm actually very interested to hear how you get the like base load PV allowance determined just using CABEC, which I usually don't use for energy modeling.
Or what do you use?
Well, I use ISVE, but
Oh, you
if I
do?
don't have scope for that,
Oh,
I'm not
yeah.
gonna build a whole model to determine
Yeah.
the base loads.
Are you doing takeoffs in CVEC? Are you doing without building an ISVE model?
Well, usually we have a reason to have an ISV model, like lead certification or
Right, right,
something.
right.
So that's more accurate for energy analysis of like what the base load needs for the PV. So my question is, how do you use CVEC to determine that base allowance and then give the rest to the housing?
Yeah, and it's probably,
Yeah.
and actually in general, I haven't done it yet.
Okay.
But like I know how to set up the meters, and it's like, oh yeah, you just take this zone, you wanna monitor like HVAC, you select the loads, and either whether it's the IDF editor in Energy Plus, if you're doing non-res, or then reading documentation on the CSE simulation side, and just like, oh yeah, I wanna meter this zone, these loads in this zone, we'll create a, CSV file. And then you can plug that to get your 8760, plug it into whatever tool you need.
If you do modeling in ISVE, I'm convinced, because I can work in CBEC, it will take me 4 times as long to get through the CBEC errors as it takes Luke, which is why we brought it in. But for takeoffs, I haven't done takeoffs in just for doing the modeling and avoiding the takeoffs, ISVE for me is worth it. And then I just build in, $200, $300 per project for ISVE, licensing for every project. I include a little bit for ISVE, a little bit for Helioscope, a little bit for Energy Toolbase. And it's part of my it's not overhead, I'm just building it in the client pays for it. Yes?
Have you changed like your internal load assumptions at all in ISB to get a better estimate of usage?
Great question. There are unanticipated things that we do put in. Like I model everything that's an external load that is not typically picked up in the occupancy schedule. So the washers and dryers are all electric. So I've got to have, and I had to build my own occupancy schedule for the laundry rooms. Got some good information from our vendor about how much they're being used. It's open from 7 o'clock to 10 o'clock. I build an occupancy schedule and it seems to work. Got to do that. Right now I have another one for EV charging. If I have enough space, I'm like, hey, I can justify a little bit more PV if I can include and model EV chargers. So I've got a new profile for EV charging. Got to do elevators separately. I have a model for elevators. Little things that I plug in on the side. But what I found over time is that people have been pressing me on the family projects. The assumptions get me within usually like 3 to 5%. Sometimes a little bit lower, sometimes I'm a little bit higher. But the ASHRAE assumptions that are built into ISV are usually pretty good for just about everything else.
We use a little bit of field data from Sean Armstrong and try to normalize and pull that back into models, but
Yeah.
just for like research.
That's, if you can get your hands on it, that's great. Like we've got a couple, like 100 projects where we're looking at it regularly. So I can usually get into it and determine how close I'm getting. We're just about at time. One more question.
So for the QAC in San Diego County where you got it down to basically the flat rate fee. Here's what I found. Is that because you added a battery? Did you add a battery?
No battery, all solar. Yeah,
Do
and
you ever find that you're like oversizing the PV systems? I do have clients that say add as much PV as possible, because it's as low as possible.
Yeah.
But you are kind of feeding back to the grid at certain points, and you want to.
they won't let you do it. They'll always ask you to justify your loads, which is another reason I use ISV. I kick out the file which gives me the whole building energy profile. If you're at 4-story buildings, 3-story buildings, and you've got plenty of roof, you might get to zero net energy. If you've got 3-story buildings and carport, you can overproduce. If you get to 4-story buildings, you're never gonna overproduce unless you start going facade solar. And then as you go up, it gets harder and harder. You cannot beat, like, we ran the Iris, I had
Yeah.
to run the Iris without any solar, because we were worried that SDG&E is not gonna turn on
Yeah.
the PV system as quickly as we needed to, which is probably gonna be true. So, but we couldn't beat the published utility allowance. With a code compliant building, the published utility allowance is lower, which is criminal, that it's this low, because it's actually benefiting developers like National Core, but it's penalizing residents. And it's not incentivizing conservation, but it's a conversation with the Housing Authority who establishes those utility allowances. Nick,
Last year you showed the incentive stack that allowed you to do this type of building, which is so different
Yeah.
than all the other developers. Is that in this economics too, or are you able
No.
to do it without them?
completely independent. Mac, who's off on my team, who manages rebates for us, is off studying the QAC one right now. But we're able to, I'd say, a couple $100,000 worth of incentives for new construction. We're able to leverage, but we don't bank that. We don't show that to anybody while we're doing it. We just show up and we say we got you $300,000 in incentives for your new project. And usually in the middle of construction, they run out of funds and they need a little bit of an extra kick. The stuff I showed last year was existing buildings, and there it is so critical, because it's got to be rebate only in a lot of those projects. You guys, thank you. I will hang out and answer some questions.
And there's coffee and charge